All right, it's great to be here tonight. I'm thankful for the opportunity, for sure, and appreciate Pastor Crockett's invitation to speak during the missions conference. And he had asked me late last semester, and of course, we had a desire to do that. Speaking about church planting is something that's definitely on our hearts and has been part of our lives for many years, both when we were pastoring in Inner City, and we hope to continue that as we serve here at Morningside with Open Door Baptist Mission and with the missions committee here at the church. We're just excited about what God's doing. Let me mention a couple resources. Pastor Huffman mentioned my wife's CD. You know, we did that. She doesn't want me to talk about it really, but it's my favorite CD, and it's a real blessing to me. I listen to it whenever she's not in the car. She recorded that with the Bob Jones Chorale when our son Pearson was almost born. So good memories of that. But we have several copies of that, and we have a suggested donation of $5 out there. But you're welcome to take one, whatever, you know, if you can afford it or not, just take one. They don't do us any good sitting in our garage. So please avail yourself of one of those CDs, and I really hope it will be a blessing to you. It's got some real God-exalting, fully orchestrated songs on it. A couple of my favorites. A mission song, Here I Am, Lord, is a real blessing to consider God's call in your life. There's an arrangement of Ferris, Lord Jesus, that is just majestic, and it really is a wonderful way to exalt the Lord. So enough about that. Please grab one of those if you can. There's also a handout, especially for you guys that are college students here, about the Spread the Word program at our former church, Intercity Baptist. They run an internship program in the summer, have about a dozen men they hire to come in, and they help with different church planning efforts in the Detroit metro area, which, like any metro region in the United States, is incredibly diverse ethnically and religiously, and we have several church plants going on up there that men can serve in evangelistic efforts to help build the foundation of the church. And each one of these teams are coordinated by evangelist Aaron Coffey. He spends the summer at the church, and really a great opportunity. If I was a college student, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I loved participating with these guys the last couple of years I was up there. So I didn't leave, someone else left these out there, but they're out at the information at the Welcome Center, and if you would like more information, you can do that. You can also talk to Mikey Albert. He did the internship last summer. He'd be glad to give you more information about that. And then, you know, with our health issues, I really appreciate your prayers. We were obviously not expecting that. It was coming up to exam week at the university last semester, and we had some exams of our own to take, and the Lord saw fit to thankfully let it be discovered. I had a malignant tumor and had surgery that week, and went through recovery over Christmas, and doing 9 weeks of chemo here at the beginning of the semester. So we're in the third week of that, and they tell me my white blood cell count is really low, so I don't feel terrible, you know, a little weak and all that kind of stuff, but we need to be careful. So I haven't been able to gather with worship with you all here for several weeks, but I've watched every live stream except for Sunday. It didn't work quite right Sunday morning, so I had to watch another service. But it's been a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of the service through the live stream, and if you're ever at home, I would encourage you to get on YouTube and check that out. It's very helpful. And that's been a blessing to us. And many of you all of you, I'm sure, have been a blessing in prayer, but a lot of you have been a blessing through sharing meals and fellowship and encouraging notes. So we really appreciate it as a family. But I'm not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about church planting. So Pastor asked me to share with you the need for church planting. And I want to do that along a few lines tonight. And my experience in Michigan just gave me a real heart for planting churches. We started a mission board and planted several churches throughout the United States, but then particularly a few of them in the Detroit area where where our church invested people into church plants locally. And I just want to, share what a blessing that process is to you by way of testimony. How God in His sovereignty and His kindness and His graciousness, when you invest to build His church, He takes care of continuing to build your church, your local church. And really, that's one of the major things I want to communicate tonight. But also, just want to give you a snapshot of the need for church planning along the biblical lines, the practical lines, and then statistical lines. And I hope to do that here in about the next 15 minutes or so, and then we'll still have time for prayer together as a congregation tonight. So, church planning, be convinced of the need. If you're not already, I know a lot of you are, you're heavily invested already in church planning here at Morningside and through Open Door Baptist Missions. Let's talk about the biblical and practical need. First of all, we're called as a church to fulfill the Great Commission. Matthew 28, you're familiar with this, but 19 says, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world." Jesus called us to plant churches, not simply share the gospel. Inherent in the Great Commission, there is the command, as it's otherwise translated, to go and make disciples. And there are some attending participles there with a command force to them, baptizing and teaching. And we know the baptism is an ordinance of the local church, and teaching takes place in the context of a local church where gifted teachers are raised up and appointed to use their gifts in the midst of a church, which is to serve as the pillar and support of the truth. And so when it comes to fulfilling the Great Commission, the primary way we do that is by establishing churches that then reproduce new churches. And God has called us to do that. The Commission calls us to make disciples in the context of the local church. Acts 2, and we had a good, excellent biblical arguments for church planning in the Sunday morning and Sunday evening messages this last week, so I won't spend a lot of time here from Danny Brooks and from Bruce McAllister. Acts chapter 2 presents the pattern of evangelism and resultant incorporation into the local church. Paul says in Acts, those who believed the word were baptized and added to the church. That process takes place in various places throughout the world. As we take the gospel, people believe the gospel, they are identified with Christ through believers' baptism, which takes place in a community of believers, and they're added to the local church. And so we see that church planning assures us that this process is to take place. We're to be about making disciples, not just soliciting decisions to follow Christ. And then we see this in Paul's apostolic strategy. His strategy was to plant churches in Titus 1:5. He talks about the process of appointing elders in every city. So the goal was to establish communities of believers in every city to which he went, and to have those believers appoint leadership for their congregations in their local churches. And so very clearly we're given, and we could say a lot more about that, but we're given a biblical mandate to plant churches, to be involved in the process of obeying the Great Commission by planting churches. And so the biblical need is very apparent. And we have some also practical experience. If you're involved in church planting or study or read about it, you know that new churches are much more effective at reaching the lost than established churches. Now, this is not in any way an excuse for us as Morningside to say, well, new churches are better at reaching the lost, so we don't need to do it. We need to be reaching the lost as well. Obviously, it's part of our mission as a church to reach our community, to share the gospel, to see people baptized and added to our local church. But statistically and practically, new churches are much more effective at reaching the lost because their very life depends on it. To build a new church, you have to bring people into a new congregation. And some of the statistics from the North American Mission Board bear that out. Established churches reach an average of 3.3 people. I always like that third of a person that's added, right? They didn't quite get all the way under the water, but per 100 members. But new churches reach an average of about 12 people per 100 members statistically. So about 3 to 4 times as much evangelistic effectiveness takes place from new churches. New churches tend statistically to gain 60 to 80% of their members from unchurched people in the community, while 80 to 90% of gains in established churches come from transfers. And that's from Tim Keller's article, Why Plant Churches. And so statistically, and we see that in our experience here, at least I have in the last year, the Lord has added several people to our congregation. And thankfully, some of them have been people that have come to Christ. But a lot of them have been people that have, like us, we were added to this church, transferring from Michigan to South Carolina. The Lord moved us here. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of growth at all. People need to be discipled and serve in a local church. But new churches tend to add more unchurched people. They have that as their entire focus, while established churches have a multifaceted focus when it comes to caring for the membership they already have. And those are all good things to do. But it gives us another reason why we want to plant church. Planting churches also spurs evangelistic outreach and sponsoring churches. And when I was up at Intercity Baptist, we planted three, in the last 10 years, about 3 local churches. So that is churches within driving distance of our church. Some people lived in the community of the churches where we planted churches, came to our congregation. Some people lived in our community and went to those new church plants. That's how close we were. We're in relative proximity. And during that time, one of the churches, we invested more than 100 members in a church south of us, in a suburb south of us. Another church was an urban church in Hamtramck, Michigan, and we invested about 50 people from our membership into that church. And then another church that was just starting when I was leaving, we were investing another 30 to 50 people into that church locally, which is really only a half a mile distance-wise away from our church, but in a different community. And so that's about 200 people from our home congregation, which our church up there is smaller than Morningside. We had about 700 to 800 members. And investing a significant slice of your congregation into church plants is not an easy thing to do. Financially, it's not an easy thing to do. Personnel-wise, people serving in the church, it's not an easy thing to do. Fellowship-wise, it's a difficult thing to do, to not meet with the same people continually and see them go to another congregation. But the Lord blessed those efforts by replacing all of those people with other people, both from the community and people moving in and people added to our church. And really the membership never really went down very much, just for a time, and then would be built back up. And I saw from our experience God blessing the efforts of investment by His continual investment in our local church. And I just want to share that, because when it comes to our local need, which we'll talk about in a minute, we have the opportunity and have had the opportunity to invest in church plants around the nation and around the world. But we have the need to invest in church planting in our local community as well. And when that time comes to invest people into a place when we're still trying to take care of things here at home, we need to believe God's promises that He will bless those efforts, because we're seeking to build His church. He will take care of building our church. And so we see that in our practical investment. Planting churches allows investment of gifted people who otherwise may be languishing in established churches. You know, we have a lot of gifted people here, and a lot of churches are filled with gifted people that can go on and they can further the use of their giftedness in a new congregation. And so we need to see that as an opportunity to really invest people strategically in the work of Christ. And then sometimes new churches best reach different demographic or social groups as well. And I don't want to overplay that. I think a lot of the church growth movement has overplayed what they call the homogeneous or homogeneous unit principle. That is, people come to Christ more readily if they don't have to cross social or ethnic or demographic lines. That's a church growth principle. I think God has designed the church to be a place where all lines are broken down and all barriers are removed as people are brought into unity in the body of Christ. But practically as well, we can see that people may be more likely to visit a smaller congregation at times than to walk into a large congregation. Or they may be more likely to connect with a group of people that is they know someone personally, and there's a smaller group that they can get to know. or even in different demographic situations, and especially in ethno-linguistic groups, people can be more likely to attach themselves to a new congregation that uses their language and is part of their culture. And so, we're involved obviously in our multilingual congregations here at Morningside, and we're doing that to meet that need and to reach out to people with different language needs. And that's why we do that, because people obviously want to understand the preaching they're hearing and to be a part of a congregation which they feel a part of in their heart. And so new churches can best reach out to some different demographic and social groups, though that should never be a cause for us to hesitate to reach out across all lines. But I want to finish our time tonight talking about the numbers. I was in my undergrad at Bob Jones several years ago. I did my undergrad in math, and I used to like numbers and studied math, and I still am fascinated by statistics. Although 67% of statistics are made up on the spot, and so that's you got to take things with a grain of salt. But I want to look at really along two lines why we need to really not just say, okay, we should invest, but why we need to feel a real burden, a real significant burden to invest in church planting. Because our country needs investment in church planting desperately, and the numbers tell us that. The population of the United States by 2020 is going to be about 340 million people, million souls in the country. And I'm going to use some very generous statistics when it comes to religious adherence and Christians, okay? And the statistics are probably much more sobering than the ones I'm going to use, but the ones I use still make a very sobering point. So what percentage of people are lost? Well, in the United States, a little over 50% were not members of any Christian, quote-unquote Christian church. This is speaking the most broadly. Okay, and I have a little text box there, which you may not be able to read, but the Pew Research Forum says that of that 50% that was a member, a little under 50% that was an adherence to some kind of Christian church, 25.5% of that were members of evangelical Protestant churches, 14.7% mainline Protestant, which there is very little glimmer of the gospel in mainline Protestant churches. Very, very little true belief, in my opinion. So that makes the percentage even less. 6.8%, or 6.5% historically black Protestant, which tend to have gospel influence, but many times mixed with social gospel issues. And so, but I'm going to stick with the 50% number just to make the point tonight. The population, if the population here is 340 million by 2020, obviously you divide that in half, and that leaves us with 170 million lost people to speak most positively in the United States. And I took some statistics from the Southern Baptist Convention. They're the largest denomination in the United States, and so their statistics are easy to come by. And they reported 300,000 baptisms in 2016, which is a lot. I mean, praise the Lord for how many people profess faith in Christ through the Southern Baptist Convention churches in 2016. But even with that, if only 50% of the United States citizens are lost, their baptisms represent only 0.18% of the lost people in the United States. Even though it sounds like a big number, it's a very, very small fraction of the number of lost people we have to reach with the gospel in our country, our own mission field here at home. What about all the evangelical churches in America, in North America? If we speak generously on that, how many evangelical churches, that is gospel preaching churches, are there in North America? A very generous number is 400,000 churches. Now let's assume that each of our churches baptizes the same average as a Southern Baptist Convention church, and that's 6.6 people per church per year, which is not very many, is it? What about all the evangelical churches? If you multiply, obviously, 400,000 by 6.6, that's 2,640,000 people. Souls added to the church, praise the Lord for that. If we're faithful and we are reaching 6.5 people over the course of a year. Hopefully we'll reach more than that, but if we are, praise the Lord for those that are coming to Christ. But that's still only a little over 1.5% gain on lostness. I call them the lost people, our mission field in the United States. It's a very small sliver. If all of the evangelical churches are keeping up the same average number of conversions as the Southern Baptists are, it's still a very small gain in reaching the lost with the gospel. Let's look at another view based on, and this is if the population of the United States was staying the same, which it's not. Okay, it's growing. Let's look at this view. If the population of the United States was staying the same, we would just barely be making a dent in the number of lost people at the current, with the current amount of churches, at the current rates of conversion and outreach. But let's look at this view of the population of the United States. It's increasing. One birth every 8 seconds. Okay, so think about that, ladies. Every 8 seconds, one of your friends is going through having a baby. We got one death every 11 seconds. And I hope that doesn't take place tonight. Here, one net international migrant every 33 seconds. So all these statistics taken together, we have a net gain of one person every 17 seconds. So in the 30 minutes I speak tonight, approximately, there are more than 100 people added to the United States that need the gospel, just like that, in 30 minutes. And so we have a net gain of one person every 17 seconds, and that's 1,855,060 people gained in the United States per year. Over 1 million people per year that need the gospel and need churches to minister to them in their communities. Population in the U.S. will increase by this much in this year. And so, what's this mean for church planting? Well, if we were to keep up with the population growth alone, not necessarily gain on lostness, set that aside and say, let's try to focus on planting churches just to keep up with the rate of population growth. What do we need to do? What is our task before us? Well, we need to start 40 churches in each state in, 2016, a typo, with 900 plus members per church to keep up with the rate of population growth. Okay, 40 churches in each state to keep up with the current rate of population growth, which is possible. We could plant 40 churches in South Carolina. Okay, not us as Morningside alone, but as a group of evangelical churches. But we need to all be focused on planting them, but I doubt we would plant churches of 900 plus members, right? It takes a while. I mean, our church has that many, but it took a few years to get to this point, right? It didn't happen overnight. And we got to remember this population growth is happening every single year. Every single year there are well over 1 million people added to, millions of people added to the population of the United States. And we need to continue to reach them with the gospel. Let's get a little more realistic. We could just start 9,275 new churches with 250 members per church, right? Or probably most realistic, trying to shoot for church plants of getting up to the growth of 100 members per church, which is a great goal to plant a church, have it grow to about that point so it's becoming self-sufficient. We need to be about planting 18,500 new churches per year in the United States to keep up with the pace of the current population growth. Okay, do you feel the burden? The numbers scream the need for church planting. They tell us we have to be starting new congregations. We have to be reaching out to the lost ourselves. We have to be very aggressive about reaching people with the gospel of Christ. And then you may not be able to read that, but this is a population growth at home. I put up some statistics about Greenville itself. As you know, based on the traffic on Woodruff Road, Greenville is growing, right? We're evidence of the fact we're helping Greenville grow. We moved in from Michigan and came here, but Greenville County, you can see the 2000 population was 379,000, about 380,000. The 2014 population was 482,000, and there was over 100,000 population increase between the years 2000 and 2014, with about a 2% annual increase. So in the course of a little over about a decade and a half, Greenville County itself has increased by over 100,000 people. 100,000 people. So if we just planted 100 churches to reach 1,000 people each in Greenville County alone, we'd be keeping pace with our local population growth. And then you may be able to see the stats for the Greenville MSA region. That's Greenville, Lawrence, Anderson, and Pickens County had a growth of 137,000 people as well. Obviously, most of the growth taking place in Greenville County. So even in our near county regions, we have incredible growth taking place, and it's not slated to slow down at all. If you read articles in the Greenville News and such, it's slated to continue to grow. Greenville is a place people want to live here. They want to come here. It's a place that's becoming incredibly diverse. You know, when we moved from Detroit, we're going to Greenville. God wants us to move and minister at Bob Jones and find a local church in which to minister down here. And some part of our heart, though, was still in Detroit with its diversity and possibilities of backyard missions, I like to call it, reaching different ethnic and religious groups in our own backyard. And I thought, man, we're going to Greenville, and we're going to go down to the south, and it's homogenous, it's religious, and since I moved down here, I've recognized just how much more diverse Greenville is than it was when I lived here 20 years ago and was a grad student here, and how much more increasingly diverse and secular Greenville County is becoming. And so a place that is part of the Bible Belt and has churches, really still churches on about every corner. The geographical boundaries are expanding, and there are no longer churches on every corner where homes are being built and businesses are being established. And so we need to strategically think about how we're going to invest in our local communities. And so I want to issue finally a call to action and along with that a call to prayer for us to pray for tonight. And I want to encourage you and urge you to wholesoledly. I mean, that's beyond wholeheartedly. Okay, that's your pocketbook, your actions, your energies, your prayer, your soul. Get behind the current opportunities we're involved in church planting. Okay, the Mears are out in Lincoln, Nebraska. Danny Brooks talked about going to Salt Lake City here, and I don't know if we'll be able to support them or not, but Lord willing, we'll be able to get behind them and see them go out there. I have a brother-in-law that moved out to Salt Lake City. He's a State Farm agent to be involved in the Gospel Grace Church out there, and they were just burdened to be involved in a church plant that's on the front lines of reaching people with the gospel. And so we have family invested in that kind of work, and maybe God would move some of you to move to one of these places to be invested in the work. The Hargises, I think we'll hear more about that probably from Greg Wright on Sunday. Their church is planning a church across town in St. George, Utah with their assistant pastor, Jeremy Hargis. He's a friend of ours from ministry days gone by, and man, just excited about what God's doing there. When a church that you are involved in planning is planning another church, it's really thrilling, and I think Pastor Crockett called it like a granddaughter church. That's just a real blessing. And we need to get behind these opportunities. And we need to also heavily invest in strategic church planting efforts locally. We need to, as a congregation, be praying about what God wants us to do locally to invest in church planting. And I put up a couple churches that were planted relatively recently. Cornerstone Baptist Church, Pastor Reimers, Palmetto Baptist Church with Pastor Ormiston. Those churches were planted in the last, I think, about 10 years locally with involvement with several Greenville congregations. And I'm not privy to all that took place with that, but I'm really thankful those are two very strong congregations now and representing Christ in different communities in the Greenville area. So we need to replicate that process over and over and over and over again in our local community. And what's next for Morningside? We need to pray. We need to lay out a geographic plan in partnership with other churches that we can partner with, like-minded churches for the Greenville metro area. And we need to pray for God to raise up leaders and gifted people ready to give and go and invest in church plants. And I really think if we are faithful to build God's church through church planting, God will continue to build our church here. And I hope you'll pray to that end. and get involved as God lays things on our heart. I'm going to turn it back over to Pastor Huffman. We'll spend some time in prayer for these things.